Not like that. Yeah. Yeah.
Board's back in session. Make it seated.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Statement called Greg Kareem, Your Honor.
You do solemnly swear that the testimony which you will now give to me before this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do. Thank you.
Will you state and spell your name, please?
Yes, my name is Greg Kareem, K-A-R-I-M.
And how are you employed?
I'm a firearm and tool mark examiner for the Austin Police Department Forensic Science Division.
In layman's terms, what does a firearm and tool mark examiner do for the City of Austin Police Department?
Well, we do comprehensive examination of firearms submitted to the laboratory. We do comparative analysis of fired ammunition components such as bullets, cartridges, live rounds of ammunition. We do gunshot residue distance determination on clothing. We do serial number restorations. We're on call 24/7 to respond to major shooting events and officer-involved shootings. So we also collect evidence and do trajectory analysis. We also do tool marks, such as a bolt cutter and a lock, or a screwdriver and a door latch type comparisons. So basically, whether it's a bullet or a fired cartridge, it's the tool marks that are on there that we're actually comparing using comparison microscopes.
And what education and training do you have in this field?
Well, I started December 1st, 1995 with the Oklahoma City Police Department's Ballistics lab, and was trained for 2 years with other examiners. And during that time period and currently, I attend all available extra schools that are available pertaining to ammunition, firearms, and gunshot residue and tool marks. There are different agencies who...
9 and laboratory L1203593. Those are unique numbers assigned to this particular case, is that correct?
That is correct.
And I want to go through the evidence that was submitted to you for follow-up pertaining to this case, beginning with lab, which you labeled as lab item 12. Can you discuss with us what lab item 12 was?
Yes. It was a magazine, 380 auto caliber. It's blue steel, single column, 6-round capacity. It was submitted with 3 Remington 380 auto jacketed hollow point bullets that are a brand known as Golden Saber. It's the type of design of the hollow point. And 3 Federal 380 auto jacketed hollow points that are also known as Hydra-Shocks.
And I know you didn't make the documentation, but as far as the documentation of whoever collected this item, what was the description of where this was found?
I had written in my report that documented in Versidex, which is the police reporting system, quote, collected from Daniel's personal property and backpack, firearm magazine containing 6 rounds.
And lab item 37?
37 is a Remington 380 auto fired cartridge case that is nickel.
And did the documentation with lab item 37 indicate what tint number it was and where it was located at the scene?
Yes, it was listed as tent number 3, and the packaging was marked southwest of body.
And lab item 39,
It's a Federal 380 auto, jacketed hollow point, also hydroshock, live cartridge, which means it was not fired.
and does it indicate what tent number at the scene that item was?
Yes, tent number 5.
And lab item 40,
Item 40 is a Jimenez Arms Incorporated model JA 380, caliber 380 auto. It's a single action semi-automatic pistol, and the serial number is 107622. Also submitted with it is one Federal 380 auto, jacketed hollow point hydroshock, live cartridge, noted removed from the chamber at scene, and the magazine from the pistol that contained one Remington 380 auto, jacketed hollow point, golden saber. And it was marked removed from the magazine at the scene.
and that was a live cartridge as well.
Yes, it is a live cartridge.
And that was documented as tent number 6 at the scene.
That is correct. Correct.
Can you describe what 380 auto single action semi-automatic pistol means?
380 auto is the caliber designation. It means that the bullet has an approximately 9 millimeter diameter, and the cartridge case length is approximately 17 millimeters. The single action means that when you pull the trigger, it does a single function, and that is release the firing pin in order to strike the primer of the cartridge that would be chambered in the barrel. Semi-automatic simply means that when you manually load the magazine and insert it into the gun, this particular model does not have an external hammer, so you must pull the slide back to put the cartridge in the gun, into the chamber, but there's no hammer to, it's caught now. On the left side, there is a safety switch that can be manipulated, but the other safety that's on this firearm is at the back end. There's a little red indicator to let the person holding the gun know that there is a round in the chamber.
And,
So,
excuse
sorry.
me, I'm sorry.
Part 2 of a semi-automatic and how it functions is once you've done all those steps, taking the safety off and squeezing the trigger, it fires once. However, it goes through 8 different cycles of feeding, chambering, locking, firing, unlocking, extracting, ejecting, and then it starts over again for every time you pull the trigger. So it's only going to fire one time with each pull of the trigger.
And if it's operating properly, you would only have to cock it once.
Yes, in the beginning, you just cock it and load it into the chamber the first time. The rest, it's done automatically.
And in theory, if operating properly, would fire every round in the magazine as long as you continue to pull the trigger with no other action required.
And as long as you have ammunition in the magazine.
And lab item 41,
Did I mention tent 6 is where the pistol was related to?
I thought I asked you that. If I didn't, I apologize.
Item 41 is a Remington 380 auto fired cartridge case. It's also nickel.
And it was documented as what tip number at the scene?
Number 7
Lab item 46,
is a 380 caliber jacketed hollow point hydroshock projectile.
And it was documented as tent number 12, is that correct?
That is correct.
And lab item 58,
Is a Federal 380 auto fired cartridge case.
and that was documented as tent number 2.
Correct.
And then lab item 85,
Lab item 85 is a Smith & Wesson model M&P 40 single action semi-automatic pistol. Also under number 85 was the live cartridge from the chamber, the magazine containing 15 rounds of spear ammunition, which is gold dot in .40 caliber. There were also 2 more magazines for the M&P, one containing 14 rounds and the other one containing 15. Those magazines are 15 round capacity indicated.
and where did the document, or where did the packaging indicate that Smith & Wesson was located?
From the duty belt,
Of the victim?
yes,
And that weapon is consistent with what is issued by the Austin Police Department?
that is correct.
And in fact, it bears the language that it is in fact issued by the Austin Police Department. Is that right? It's actually marked on the weapon itself.
Yes.
And lab item 100,
Is a blue Flying Cross brand long sleeve uniform shirt, Austin Police Department shoulder patches, Padron metal name tag, and there were defects in the shirt.
and lab item 102,
Is a point blank Vision brand blue body armor vest with center plate and ballistic panels, Thor shield, and electroshock weapon protection inside, 100% polyester carrier.
And as to the follow-up testing that was done on those items, if you are in receipt of fired cartridge casings, what examination can you make on those, and what conclusions can you draw from fired cartridge casings?
From fired cartridge cases, we can determine whether or not it was fired in a particular firearm, or we can eliminate it from being fired in a particular firearm. Or thirdly, we can be inconclusive about it.
And how do you go about comparing a fired cartridge casing to a known weapon to determine whether or not that casing was fired from that particular weapon?
The 3 fired cartridges that were submitted in this case are technically unknowns in our field, and the pistol that was submitted in 380 Auto is an unknown. We'll shoot it after we do an examination of it and retain those test fires that were specific to that firearm. The first step after that will be to actually put the test on the comparison scope and compare the tool marks microscopically and see whether or not the gun actually repeats those marks. There are going to be class characteristics first. Then within the class characteristics, there will be individual characteristics, and that's what makes it unique to that particular firearm.
It's fair to say that each firearm has enough idiosyncrasy to leave its own identifying marks on a casing when it fires around.
I would like to say every firearm, but I cannot.
But from your experience, every firearm you've encountered,
I've encountered firearms that do not transfer unique markings, but do have them, yes.
and in those cases, you can't make a determination.
That's correct. That's where an inconclusive would come in, where there would be class characteristics, but the lack of individual characteristics.
And if you have a projectile that was fired and a known weapon, are you able to determine whether or not that projectile was fired from that particular weapon?
Yes, and it would be in the same method. We would do a test of the test-fired bullets that we obtained to see where these individual markings are and that it does repeat, and then compare the known to the unknown on the comparison scope and document it.
And what types of things within a weapon would leave unique markings on a projectile?
Well, in this case, it would be the rifling would leave the markings on the sides of the projectile. The class characteristics would be, well, how many lands and grooves of this rifling is in this gun, and what direction do they turn, and what's the width of those particular lands or grooves. Then looking within those lands and grooves, we would find individual characteristics.
And again, it's often possible to make an absolute determination based on consistencies of the markings that a particular round was fired from a particular weapon.
What makes firearms identification possible is the fact that the tool that makes the firearm is under a constant state of change. So every time a rifling is cut away or it's being reamed, the tool microscopically changes. The second half of it is that once you shoot a projectile through that barrel, the tool marks transfer to the softer metal of the bullet. And basically that's how it happens.
And in this particular case, did you test fire lab item 40, the Jimenez Arms pistol?
Yes, I did on 4/27 of 2012.
And what was the results of your test firing of that weapon?
That it was capable of discharging live rounds of ammunition.
Did you conclude that it was a firearm as defined by Texas law?
Yes, sir.
And did you have any problems in your firing of the weapon or the weapon's operation that you dealt with?
I noted in my notes the details that the magazine binded when I loaded it. It failed to feed on the first pull of the slide during the test. It fed normally upon the second time I pulled the slide back and released it. It fed the round. Fired all four normally during the first test. Intermittent ability to feed consistently the first round because it would make the front of the nose on the bullet go down instead of stay up for a proper feed.
Well, once it was fed, it operated properly from that point on.
Yes. I test fired it additionally without, I noted that I test fired it 9 more times with laboratory ammunition during additional testing and no other problems.
And if I could direct your attention to lab item 12, which was the magazine that was recovered. That's the one that was loaded with 6 rounds, is that correct?
Correct.
Was it consistent with what would be used in lab item 40?
I examined it on May 1st, 2012, and I noted in my report that the magazine was determined to be designed for a Jimenez pistol and function normally in the item 40, and that the federal ammunition, I'm going ahead, sorry.
And the ammunition in that magazine was also designed to be fired in a .380 as well?
Correct.
And lab item 39, which is the live cartridge located at the scene, was it manufactured for operation in a 380 as well?
That is correct.
And then of the 3 cartridge casings that were located at the scene, were you able to make any comparisons as to those 3 items in comparison to lab item 40 and reaching a conclusion?
Yes, on May 1st, 2012, they were all 3 positively identified as having been fired in item 40, 380 pistol.
And as to the 1 projectile that was recovered from the scene, lab item 46, were you able to make any comparisons with that item from rounds fired from lab item 40 and make any comparisons and conclusions?
Yes. Examination April 27, 2012. The projectile was positively identified as having been fired in the 380 pistol number 40, and that the projectile was found to be consistent with federal premium personal defense hydroshock ammunition by design.
And you described that two of the 3 rounds were one brand and the third brand was another. How are you able to determine that the projectile found was what brand did you say it was? I'm sorry.
Well, federal, so the hydroshock would be consistent with the federal brand, and the Golden Saber is consistent with Remington's brand. And how do I say that?
Do they have unique characteristics that allow you to say it's a federal and not a Remington?
Yes, it's like looking at the difference between a Honda and a Ford. Not to say that they're either one, but you could tell they're 2 different vehicles.
Yeah. As to the live cartridge and the 3 casings that were found at the scene, would Officer Padron's duty weapon be capable of discharging any of those rounds?
No, you cannot discharge a 380 auto in a 40 caliber. A 40 caliber would be considered a 10 millimeter size, and the 380 would be a 9 millimeter size.
And in addition to testing the 1 projectile and the 3 casings, did you do additional testing regarding the duty shirt and the defects in the duty shirt and reach any conclusions as to that?
Yes. Separated out as distance testing results. You want me to proceed?
Could you please
Yes.
explain your conclusions as to that?
Item 100, which is the blue Flying Cross uniform shirt with apparent bullet defects, was examined April 23rd, 2012. An entry type defect was located on the front right pocket, and a corresponding elongated exit type defect was located on the right side of the uniform shirt. Both defects and the surrounding areas were microscopically examined and chemically processed for the presence of gunshot residues. A pattern of residues consistent with the discharge of a firearm was observed and documented. Using item 40 380 auto pistol and laboratory ammunition, test patterns were produced at various measured muzzle to garment distances. The residue pattern observed and documented on item 100, the uniform shirt, is consistent with a muzzle to garment distance greater than contact, however less than 14 inches, which translates to having a median distance of 7 inches from the end of the gun, which is the muzzle, to the entry of the shirt.
And so in layman's terms, you essentially fired that weapon at shirts to conclude how far away the weapon was from the shirt when that particular defect was created.
Yes, I did obtain uniform shirts of the same type and manufacturer that are issued, and did test patterns at known distances.
And can you describe what would cause a pattern of residue consistent with the discharge of a firearm?
Well, when you shoot a piece of material up close, it's going to have a signature to it to let you know that was a contact shot. It usually rips the material. The 1 inch away to 3 and so forth, the dense pattern increases with distance in its size. However, it decreases in its density as you get farther away from the target.
And that's a combination of gases and other things expelling with the projectile.
Correct. The two chemicals that we're basically looking for is the byproduct of burnt gunpowder residue called nitrites, and we're looking for lead.
And you described that the muzzle to garment distance was greater than contact, less than 14 inches, and a median distance of 7 inches. But was it your finding that at the angle, the weapon itself was probably closer to the shirt than 7 inches, the gun itself when it was fired? Does that make sense?
No, it doesn't make sense.
It was at a fairly steep angle from right to left, is that correct?
Yes, because based on looking at the other items, such as the vest, and there's no defects on the vest. So it's like it went through the shirt without touching the vest.
I approach the witness, John.
Sir, if I could, if we're dealing with my right shirt pocket, if it's a distance of 7 inches, that's about here. Is that fair? I mean, fair
That's
to
your
say?
left pocket, though.
Sorry. Been a long week. I don't have a right pocket to show you, but assuming there's one here, it would be at an angle closer to this than this. Is that correct?
Well,
Because it's going.
it depends on how far the shirt may have been.
Okay, so you can't make any conclusion to that just based on not knowing how the shirt was situated at the time?
Correct.
Okay.
And then in addition to that testing, did you also go to the scene and make observations and conclusions as to the trajectories and other items such as that at the scene?
Yes, at the request of lead detective David Fugit, trajectory analysis was performed. Scene examinations were performed on April 17th and April 18th of 2012 during the morning hours at the Walmart 12900 North I-35.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Sir, I'm showing you what's been marked as State Exhibit 69. Do you recognize that?
Yes.
And does that fairly and accurately depict the Walmart that you went to investigate this particular scene?
It shows me the ceiling with a tent number next to it.
Your Honor, the state would move to admit State Exhibit 69. There's no objection. And sir, looking over your right shoulder, that's what's been admitted as State's Exhibit 41, and it's a defect that was marked with tent number 14. Do you recognize that defect?
Yes, I recognize the defect, and that is a crime scene lab photo.
Okay. And of the rounds that were fired, was this projectile recovered?
That projectile continued through the roof and was not located.
And if I could skip to State's Exhibit 69, excuse me, is that the same defect from further away?
I'm sorry, you got me on the state's exhibit number.
Does this photograph show the same defect from further away?
Yes,
It is a more comprehensive photograph as to what's there prior to that actual defect.
yes.
And did you make an examination of that particular defect and perform any testing or reach any conclusions regarding that particular defect?
Yes, with the assistance of the Walmart management, we used a scissor lift to get up there and look at it up close.
And essentially, you try to make a determination from a linear standpoint of the direction of travel of the projectile that caused that defect.
Correct.
And is there any significance as to the wires between that tent number and the floor of the Walmart?
Yes,
And is there any damage consistent with those wires as well?
yes.
And what did you observe?
Defect number 14, which is the roof and ceiling, was examined on April 17, 2012. Once I see a defect, the first thing I'm going to do to it is do a field test to see if I get a positive results for lead, which in this case I did, which also confirms the passage of a bullet. And then I made measurements, and I noticed that the wires below are to their security cameras, and the bullet actually cut some of the wires prior to hitting the ceiling. A definitive trajectory was established and was found to originate in an area by the entry of the McDonald's restaurant. The McDonald's is a business within the north end of the Walmart store by the east entry-exit doors. The trajectory was determined to be an upward in an approximately southwesterly direction. The projectile struck some security camera wires prior to perforating the sheet metal ceiling and continuing through the roof. The rooftop was searched, however, locating the projectile was unsuccessful.
And so essentially you were able to track the source of that to an area in front of the Walmart by the north doors of the Walmart. The McDonald's in front of the north doors of the Walmart.
Correct.
I'm showing you what's already been admitted to State's Exhibit 42, which is a defect that was labeled to scene 15. What observations can you make regarding that particular defect?
Well, it's commonly referred to as a keyhole effect when the bullet is tumbling. But the question is what made the bullet tumble before it struck the ceiling? And it appears to me that the projectile hit it on its side on the way through the sheetrock. This is defect number 15. We examined it on and looked for the projectile on the 17th and 18th of April.
Is it fair to say that the crawl space on the other side of that sheetrock is not really conducive to passage of a full-size human?
No, it's not.
And you were unable to locate that projectile?
Correct. And there was a lot of wires hanging everywhere. I did document that with several photographs, and we went through every possible passage to get up there to find it. However, I did find what could be a secondary hit. There's these like tin metal that the sheetrock is attached to, and there's an angled dent along right under where the defect was.
And
I did test it for lead with negative results, but it was right there in that area.
And in addition to your training and experience in firearm and tool mark analysis, have you also been trained and participated in crime scene reconstruction?
Yes.
And what is crime scene reconstruction?
Well, I specialized only in shootings, but prior to that, I was trained as before CSI was on TV, we were known as technical investigators, and that was in 1984 and 85. So I've been working with crime scenes ever since.
And you've testified in that capacity before?
Yes, in both state and federal courts.
And as to the projectile that was recovered and the two defects, are you able to reach a conclusion as to which of these three was the round that struck the officer's shirt?
That this defect would be most consistent with going through the shirt and disrupting its straight travel, if you will, and start tumbling.
And is it because of the tumbling nature of the defect that you say that?
That's part of it. The other is the location of the paper that was in the pocket and the directionality of where it was in relation to where he's positioned and the location of that defect in the facade overhang of sheetrock.
And so part of that reconstruction is also going to be review of the video itself and reaching conclusions and determinations from that.
Yes.
So you're looking at the video, looking at the evidence, and putting together what you believe occurred that morning based on your training and experience.
And based upon the physical evidence of the defects, the lack of defects on the projectile that was recovered in the ice chest as well.
And so do you believe this to be the first shot fired?
Yes.
And as to the second shot fired, what's your conclusion or your opinion as to that?
As they're rolling over, an upward shot through the neck and exiting out, and based upon the shape of the projectile, that it looked like it just went through flesh and didn't hit any bone, and then just lost its velocity and then just landed into the ice chest.
And so you believe that what was marked as tent number 12 was the round that actually passed through the officer's neck?
I'm sorry, what, item 12?
Tent item 12, lab number 46.
Yes, lab item number 46 being the 380 projectile hydroshock. It has apparent biological material attached to it, which I took microscopic photos of it to document that as well.
And you photographed, but you didn't submit it for testing or anything such as that?
No.
And then the third shot, you believe to be the one that went through the roof then?
More likely than not, the angle would be more turned, and then the officer is over on the right, and there's an opening there, and it would be in line with the ceiling shot.
I personally understand. Sir, if I... I know you described this earlier, but what I would like to ask you to do would be to remove what's been admitted as State's Exhibit 49
And walk us through the process of making that weapon fire ready.
I would like to note that it's in a sealed bag with my initials and dated. The firearm has a tie strap through it and has my initials on it, which means that it's not loaded. But we're going to check it anyway.
Your Honor, can I ask the witness to come demonstrate this in front of the table? You may. I'd like to do that.
Of course, we don't have a magazine with it.
I have, there's one in the bag.
So in order to fire this pistol, we take the magazine and your box of ammunition, take one round at a time, push down on the follower, and slide it underneath these two magazine lips. The magazine holds 6 rounds. Once you've loaded it, then you insert it in the bottom of the firearm and lock it in place. And then pull the slide all the way back and let go. The cocked indicator is the red plastic piece you're seeing at the back. On the left side is the safety. Squeeze the trigger, it's not going to do anything. So when you take it off the safety, the only thing you have to do to fire this is squeeze the trigger. Notice that once it's been fired and there's no more rounds in there, the red goes away. The gun, once you fire it, will cycle as explained earlier, and that's basically what it does. You don't have to pull it back. When you fire it, it does it itself. And that's basically it. Thank you.
Mr. Green, if there's a round in the chamber already and you do activate the slide, what happens?
You're ejecting, extracting a live round, and then when you let go of the slide, it's going to feed another round.
So the next round will be fed as if the gun were fired.
Correct.
I'll pass it.
Mr. Kareem, my name is Russ. I'm not sure that we met, but I have a series of questions for you, obviously. First, I'll show you State Exhibit 43. State Exhibit, were you involved in producing State Exhibit 43 by any chance?
No.
This is a diagram that was produced of the entryway of the Walmart. Right now, approach the exhibit. And Mr. Kareem, if you'd like to get down where you can see better, you're welcome to do that, or you can stay there. It's up to you. So this is the entryway of the Walmart. This is where the police cars were parked up in front. These are the entry doors here, and where the shopping carts are here.
Okay.
These numbers here correspond to the evidence tents that were the crime scene folks put the tents. Okay, so what I'm wondering, first of all, is the first shot, I believe you said, was the one that you think went through Mr. Padron's or Officer Padron's shirt. Is that correct?
Correct.
Now, is it possible, I don't know if you're aware of this, when that kind of a shot goes through fabric at that sort of short distance, is it possible for that to muffle the noise that the gun makes?
Well, no. I'd have to say no.
All right.
The shot to the neck would be more likely to be a muffled shot.
Understood.
I shot several shirts in the range, and it was just as loud as into the shirt.
Okay.
Didn't
And
change the sound.
is the shot to the neck quieter because it's a contact wound and those gases and whatnot are being projected into the flesh?
Yes, that is a possibility of that.
Okay. Tell me this. When a gunshot is fired, is it louder in the direction in which the projectile is going, or is it just generally loud in the entire area?
I think it would be generally loud in that particular area because you're so close to a wall and you've got a concrete floor.
Well, let me tell you the reason I'm asking you this. Up here, sort of off the top where you see the notch in the wall, outside wall, there were some employees who were out there, and they reported that the first shot they heard seemed muffled compared to the second and third shots. Do you have any explanation for that, why that might have been the case?
I'm not sure where the employees are.
You see the notch in the wall there at the very top? They were outside at a break area.
Oh, they're outside.
Yes.
And there's double doors getting in.
There are doors, there are double doors getting in here, but then there's also a bay door behind the where the shopping carts go.
Okay.
So they said the first shot sounded muffled to them compared to the second and third shots. Any insight into why that might be?
No, I have no opinion to it.
The shot that wound up going out of the roof of the building, which was that 1, 2, or 3? That's the third
The
shot.
third shot.
Will this diagram help you to explain where it was that it went out of the ceiling? Can you point it out on this diagram?
It'd be where the 14 is.
Okay, so 14 is the tent that was placed up in the ceiling near the wires.
Right, and we're talking about how many feet is the ceiling?
60?
24 feet, maybe?
I don't know how high the ceiling is. Okay. So way up in the ceiling is, number 14 is where that shot went out of the ceiling in the roof of the building. Is that correct?
Mhm.
Okay. And so it's really sort of directly above where the rest of these evidence tents are. Is that correct? Well, above and slightly to the west.
I don't know what the scale is. Is it 25 feet on the right there? So it could be somewhere around 20 feet beyond and 24 feet up
Okay.
from where everything else is.
All right, okay. Understood. So where the angle of the gun then would determine how far back the bullet was when it finally wound up going through the ceiling. Is that correct?
I'm sorry.
The angle of the gun toward the ground would determine where the bullet finally wound up when it went through the roof.
That is correct.
Okay, fair enough. Now, is there any way to tell when the projectile has been expelled and the casing is ejected from the firearm, is there any way to tell how far that casing will travel?
As far as an ejection pattern analysis of the pistol, is that what you're asking about?
Yes.
Is there any way to tell how far? No. There's very variables involved in that, such as the angle of the firearm, the type of ground it actually lands on. Does it hit a wall and bounce back? Did somebody walk through and kick it and make it go farther? There's a long list.
So you could potentially do a test where you put the gun in a gun rest and fired several rounds through it to see where those projectiles landed and how far they went away, but that wouldn't necessarily determine what would happen in a real life situation. Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
So you said earlier that when a person cycles, if there's a round that is chambered and has been unfired, and a person pulls the slide, that cartridge will be ejected. Is that correct?
Yes.
Does that cartridge typically get ejected farther than an unfired cartridge, or not as far because it's heavier, or can you say?
I think it could go either way.
Okay. You said that in this case, this particular firearm, number 40, had difficulty loading the first round at times. Is that correct?
Chambering.
I apologize. So when there's a round in the magazine and the slide is first pulled back so that round would be chambered,
sometimes the gun has a hard time chambering that round.
What I did in my test was I found that if you put 6 rounds in the magazine and try to put number 6 as your first bullet into the gun, that you may have to pull the slide back twice to do it, but it will eventually feed it.
When that is done, is there any tool mark left on either the casing or the projectile?
It's usually on the cartridge case, and it's referred to as a cycling mark.
Well, it's not exactly what I meant. Although I understand what you're saying. So there is I guess it's an ejector or something like that that actually throws the case out of the gun. Is that correct?
I used to think that for many years because it was a hook,
Yeah.
but that hook thing is actually the extractor, so it just pulls the bullet out of, doesn't really throw anything. There's either the firing pin or there's a fixture at 7 o'clock, let's say, in the gun. When the cartridge actually hits it, that's what makes it go out.
And which
eject.
one of those leaves a tool mark sometimes?
Both of them.
Okay. And so the other part of that, though, is you said, I believe, that the reason in your observations why it didn't load accurately is because the nose of the bullet was down rather than staying up and being able to feed into that tube. Is that correct?
Correct. A lot of problems with semi-automatics are when we're fault tracing an issue with something. It's usually the magazine lips or a problem with the magazine because the magazine in a semi-auto, if you don't have one, you got a single shot. So it's an integral part of the pistol.
So during that feed mechanism, that misfeed, does that leave any kind of defect either on the front end, the projectile, or the front end of that cartridge, so that you could tell that particular, by looking at it, that particular unfired cartridge had jammed in the gun? Can you tell that?
On some guns you can. It depends on how sharp the actual gouge is that it may produce. I didn't make any note of that on this particular case.
So there was one particular shell casing 5, I believe, not shell casing, but unfired projectile 5, located in the general area. You can't tell whether that had previously jammed in the gun.
I couldn't tell you if it didn't just fall out of his pocket.
Because there's no way, these are tool marks, they don't have a time limit on them. Once you put them there, they stay on there. These tool marks could have been left at any time. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So, like you said, it could have fallen out of the person's pocket rather than having it cycled through the gun on that particular day.
That is correct.
So we'll pass it.
I have nothing further. Thank you.
Next witness.
And a state called Padron. John.
You do solemnly swear the testimony which you will now give before this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
proceed. Sir, would you state your name and spell your last name for the record?
Johnny Padron, Johnnny Padron.
Mr. Padron, where are you from?
I am from the San Angelo, Texas area. Actually, we live about 16 miles west of San Angelo, community of Dove Creek, close to Knickerbocker, Texas.
Never heard of it.
Small little place.
Is that where you're from originally?
Yes, pretty much. That's where we're from.
Now, you're here with your family, correct?
Yes, I am.
Which of your family members are here with you today?
My mom and dad, my wife, my sister, her husband, my younger brother.
Now, you're related to Jaime Padron, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Tell us how Jaime Padron fits into your family.
He is, I'm the oldest, then it's my sister, it was Jaime, and then my younger brother.
Okay. You're the oldest in the family.
Yes, I am.
And then your sister's under you, and then Jaime, and then you have a younger brother.
Correct,
So Jaime's in the middle of the board.
correct.
Now, where did y'all go to high school at?
I went to high school in San Angelo. Jaime attended high school in a little community of Cristobal, Texas, which is about 19 miles south of San Angelo.
Did you graduate from Cristobal?
He graduated from there.
Do you recall about when he graduated?
I believe that was 89.
What did he do after he graduated from high school?
He joined the Marine Corps. And he was a Desert Storm veteran as well,
He joined the Marine Corps, that would have been in, what, 1990?
right in that area.
About the time the first Gulf War was going on.
Correct.
And he joined the Marine Corps, and he was sent over to fight in Desert Storm, is that correct?
Yes, he was.
And he, of course, survived that.
Yes.
After his tour of duty, Desert Storm, what did he do after that?
He came home and joined a, he was a correction officer for a city, town in Eden, Texas. There was a detention center there, and he worked there as a correction officer.
And at some point, did he, let me back you up a second. He was in the Marines, was he honorably discharged from the Marines?
Yes, he was, yeah.
Did he receive recommendations and commendations while in the Marines?
Many of them he did, sir. Yes, sir, he did. And he left there as a corporal in the Marine Corps.
He did 4 years in the Marines?
Yes.
Mr. Padron, when he came back to Texas and he started working for this, it was a jail, is that correct?
Correct.
Corrections officer?
Mm-hmm.
Had he had a dream about becoming a police officer?
Yes, that's pretty much what he always wanted to do.
You know why he wanted to be a police officer?
My brother was pretty much a servant. You know, he served in the church. He served his community in various ways, and served this great country of ours. And of course, y'all know he was a police officer, and he was a good person.
You were close to your brother.
Yes, I was very close.
How long was he after he was a corrections officer? What did he do after that?
He joined, he was hired by the San Angelo Police Department, and I believe that was like 95, somewhere in there.
You recall how long he was part of the San Angelo Police
He
Department?
was there for 14 years, right in that area.
Did he receive commendations and citations for good work as a San Angelo police officer?
Yes, yes, he did, and he also became a police detective there with the city of San Angelo.
Do you recall what units he worked in?
No, not really. I know he worked a gang task force as well. He worked under narcotics as well. He did a bunch of stuff for the city of San Angelo.
In addition to being a police officer there, did he also serve in the community, did work in the community?
Yes, he did. He worked at a middle school, and with the middle school kids, at which he made a great impact with these kids. I have them approach me sometimes telling me that because they're where they're at because of him.
The influence he had on him when they were kids?
When they were kids, now they're
What, adults now?
in their 20s, adults. There was a police officer in Fort Worth. She said that she joined because of him. A guy just got out of the Marine Corps, said that he joined because of him.
while he was on the police force in San Angelo, did he get married?
Yes, he did.
Did he get married to a woman he met there in San Angelo?
Yes.
Did they have some kids?
Yes, they had 2 kids, 2 girls.
What are their names?
Diana and Olivia. At the time that he died, Ariana is the oldest one. She was 10 years old. Olivia was 8 years old.
Did you have a chance to watch him as he interacted with his kids?
Oh, yeah. You know, I'm a father, and I think I do my best. And I know a lot of guys that are fathers. I didn't know a better father than him. He loved those girls
They were
tremendously.
Mr. Padron, at some point, did your brother make a decision to come down to leave San Angelo, do his job there, and come down to Austin?
Yes, he did. His wife at the time got a job with the Attorney General's office, and he came down and managed to get a job with the airport police here. And I believe it was right at the time that the airport police and the APD joined or became one. And then he ended up working for APD.
So his family moved down here because of his wife's job?
Yeah, I believe so. And then and he had been looking for another job too as well. You know, they were trying to better themselves.
So he came and got on with the Austin police, with the airport police,
Yes,
and then when they merged, he became a patrol officer with the Austin Police Department.
correct.
Was he happy about that, becoming an Austin police officer?
He was very happy. He was very happy. Yes, he was.
Were you still in contact with him after he moved?
Oh
there?
yeah, yeah. We talk 2-3 times a week. He'd go down and see my parents, and you know, he'd stop by, and after he'd see mom and dad go to bed, he'd come by my house, and we'd sit there and talk. We'd talk about life. We'd talk about his kids. Talk about his plans. You know, we were pretty close.
What kind of business do you have, Mr. Padron?
I have a transportation service that caters to the oil and gas industry.
Is that a business that you own?
Yes, it is.
How long have you had that business?
I've been in there for 8-9 years, somewhere in there.
Did you ever try to get your brother to come work with you?
Yes, I did, numerous times. He wouldn't do it, you know. He said that, you know, he loved being a police officer. He wanted to stay close to his girls.
Did you try to offer him more money than he would?
Oh, he would have made more money, but he knew that, you know, he wanted to do what was his passion.
And that's being a police officer.
Being a police officer, serving the community, trying to protect and serve.
Now, the jury has heard that on April 6th of 2012, your brother was murdered.
Yes, sir.
Tell them about the last time you talked with your brother.
I talked to him about 2 days before the incident, and I was coming out of the Dallas area, Mesquite, actually, Texas, and there had been a tornadic storm that went through Fort Worth, and he knew that I was in that area. He called me up, make sure I was okay, make sure that everything was fine. I said, yeah, it's right behind us, you know, we're okay. And, you know, we talked about him coming over, you know, pretty soon. He was going to come down the week after the Good Friday.
The week after Good Friday. And Good Friday is when he was murdered.
Correct.
Now, at the time of his death, he had been divorced from his wife, is that correct?
Yes, he had been divorced.
They had been separated, then later they got divorced.
Mm-hmm.
Was he still close with his children?
Oh, he saw him every day. Yeah, he made every attempt, or not attempt, he made every effort to see his kids and to be with his kids as much as possible. He would attend their school. He'd go to their school and read to other kids just so that he could be close to his kids.
Now, so he was divorced from his wife. At the time you last spoke to him, did he talk to you about plans he had?
Yes, he
for
did.
a new relationship?
He was waiting for his ex-wife to sell the house where they were at, which still had his name on it. They had been, him and his current girlfriend had been looking at other houses, areas around the Austin area with property, because he's always loved horses, always loved the outdoors, and he was ready to start a new life.
Did he have plans to bring the girlfriend to meet your parents?
Yes, it was going to be the first time that he was going to bring the girlfriend over to my parents' house to introduce him.
Was that his plans for the week after Good Friday?
That was his plans for the week after. Correct.
So tell us about how you found out your brother had been killed. Mr. Jones, you need to take a break, there's some water.
No, I'm okay. It was about 5:30 in the morning on Good Friday. And San Angelo Police Sergeant Matt Baldwin, which is a pretty good friend of his.
Somebody your brother used to work with?
Yeah, he used to work with him, and not only work with him, they were like family together. And Matt's like family to us. He called me up about 5:30 in the morning, and he could barely speak. He was having a hard time. He was crying. He told me, we need to talk. There's been an accident, and we need to talk. My brother had a motorcycle, and I immediately thought that maybe he had had a motorcycle accident. And I asked him about that. He said, no, it's serious. We need to talk. Well, I wanted to know exactly what was going on with him. And he told me, he said he's been shot. I'm the oldest in the family. I've had to break some bad news to my dad before. And I told him, I said, you know what, I'm going to run down there to Austin. I'm going to make sure, I'm going to go find out, make sure he's okay, make sure he's all right.
All he told you was your brother had been shot.
Yes. And I'll come down and find out, make sure he's okay before I have to say anything to my mom and dad. Just after that, he couldn't say much, and finally he told me he's dead. And that was the hardest thing. I have to break it to my mom and dad.
So you're the only boy in the family, you have to tell them this.
Yeah, I had to go tell him.
And what do you do?
Well, I called the rest of my siblings. I called my brother and my sister to come down. I can't tell them what for. I just tell them, y'all just come down. And they did. Matt showed up. Another friend of Hyman's showed up as well. Robert Perry. And then we went over. Knocked on their door. Went in there and I told them. As you can imagine, they were devastated. Mom loves us very, very much, all of us. They've been very good parents to us, and they've raised a good family. They've taught us to respect. They've taught us to help where we can. The world turned into a very ugly place for us that day.
Mr. Padron, did you have to then come to Austin to make arrangements for your brother?
Yes, we did. And we were met by the 1,700 plus officers that loved him very much as well. We had to sit here and we were well taken care of, but it was a living hell.
After you came to Austin and did what you had to do to make arrangements for your brother, did you arrange to have a funeral service here in Austin?
The police department did that, and we did. And then we had to take him back home. And that's where he's at, in San Angelo.
Did San Angelo do something to commemorate your brother?
Yes, they did. Not long ago, they dedicated a park in his honor. It was a park that was under construction, and friends of his got together. What seemed like was going to be a very hard mountain to climb, everybody just let it go right through, and the park has been named in his honor.
A lot of people in San Angelo still remember your brother?
Oh yes, he had a great impact on a lot of people. They worked for the police department, like I said there. A lot of officers there knew him that are still there at the time. A lot of people knew him. A lot of people had a great deal of respect for him.
You miss your brother?
I miss him very, very dearly, very much. And my mom and dad go through hell every night. Especially listening to what's been going on here.
Thank you, Mr. John. You're on the password. Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. John has one thing up there. We have a picture we want to introduce. I told you that since we introduced so many pictures of your brother from the scene of his death, that it's fair that we should introduce a picture of your brother as he looked alive. I'm going to show you what's marked as State's Exhibit number 70. Does this fairly and accurately show how your brother looked when he was alive and working as a detective for the San Angelo Police Department?
Yes, sir. It sure does.
You want to read off State's Exhibit number 70?
No picture.
May we publish?
You may.
The password.
No question.
Thank you, sir.
State ration.
We will take a 10-minute break. We're going to recess.
Yes, sir. We have